Okay, so welcome to module 4. We're still on Bootstrap this week. We're going to be talking about navs and tabs today. So here is our schedule, some cool links and resources to share with you. We're going to do a quick review from last week. Module 4 objectives we'll get to in a minute. Navs and tabs is going to make up the bulk of our lesson today. Lab 2 is going to be, I'm going to assign it today, and it's going to be due end of day today, and that's going to involve navs and tabs, so you will have time in class to work on that and probably get that done. And then I'm also going to introduce assignment 1. So just a quick look at the course calendar. Remember, you can always check that calendar to keep you up to date on what is due. So today we've got Lab 2 due at the end of day. So again, with that, I do have some flexibility there. If you get it to me by tomorrow, I'll consider it still Friday. So ideally by end of the day, and it won't take you too long, but if you do get it to me tomorrow, that's fine as well. And then, sorry, I lied. Assignment 1 is not due next week. I'm giving you some extra time for that. Unless this is the wrong class. Nope, it is the right class. It is due the 11th, so you have some time to work on that. All right, so let's get on with what we're doing today. So a couple of links to share with you. I've actually added some to the list, so we'll start with those. First one is bootsnip.com. So what this is, it is free code snippets for Bootstrap. So when you're coding, it's not always necessary to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes people have done some cool stuff, and you can kind of benefit from that. You always want to make sure that you put proper credits to who created the code. So if you did use some of these snippets, you would want to make sure in your comments that you thank them. But if you like any of these features, so there's something like a simple sidebar, there's this cool black dashboard, and if you click on that, it'll give you the free download of the code. So pretty cool stuff. Again, just make sure that you're giving proper credit to who wrote the code. And if you are adding those in your assignments, make sure that, well, you probably wouldn't want to do that. You want to make it your own code. But anyway, other projects you can use Bootsnip. CSS Zen Garden. This is an older site, but it's kind of cool. What it is it's sort of a challenge. The HTML is the same for each site, but what people have done is apply different CSS styles to give the site a very different look. So again, the content, the structure of the site is all the same, but they have added different CSS to make it look completely different. So there's some cool stuff going on here. That's just one example. We have this. So this is pretty cool. Totally different look and feel, and different layout as well, right? So it's the content's the same, the HTML is the same, but the CSS makes it look very, very different. Let's look at a robot named Jimmy. Cool. So again, very different as well. So I think, yeah, so you can actually take a look at the CSS for each one, but you can also, I think you can submit your own as well, perhaps. So you would take that HTML and then apply your own CSS and make it look super cool. All right, so that's CSS Zen Garden. Next up is 20 awesome resources for Bootstrap lovers. So we've done a lot of work with Bootstrap. You might not be a Bootstrap lover, but you might like these resources. So we have Start Bootstrap. This is an all-in-one platform for all types of themes, guides, and pre-designed free and premium HTML templates. Cody House, library full of free web components. Bootsnip we've already looked at. Code drops, shards, Boots Watch. So lots of different things. This looks like a free font generator. This one, Fuel UX, extends Bootstrap with additional lightweight JavaScript controls for your web application. So that could be kind of cool to check out, and so on. So I'll let you take a look at that as well. There's also, this might be kind of cool, built with Bootstrap, so you can look at all the different sites that do use Bootstrap. Okay, next up, oh, this one is a fave. So this is The Simpsons in CSS. So all of this has been built just with CSS. You can click on each one and take a look at it. It's pretty sweet. So this is all the BART CSS. So obviously it's pretty complex, right? It takes a lot of CSS to create that. I don't know how you would ever figure all that out. That's crazy, but it's super cool. There's even some animation going on. So cool stuff. You can check out that as well. And I'm forgetting what this is. I'm sure it's cool. What is this? Oh, I'll let you look at that. So this is, I'll let you watch this. Actually, it's only, oh no, let's see how long it is. 2 minutes. We'll take a look. I don't think we need the song. That's an interesting soundtrack. Okay, maybe, okay, we'll continue. So, cool things you can do with CSS. You can make some animated leaves. You can make some cool hover effects. We've got this thing, whatever that is. That's pretty cool. So sort of an animated list. That's very cool. And what are we going to do here? That was pretty neat, actually. That's pretty cool. So again, all with CSS, pretty cool stuff. Pretty powerful. So the other thing I wanted to add, or the few other items I want to add to the list, how many of you have heard of North OT? The tech meetup. Yeah, no, not at all, eh? No. So if you haven't heard of it, it is and there's a Facebook group. I'll add the link to that on Blackboard. So it's a monthly tech meetup. It happens right at Georgian. It's pretty cool. It's good for networking, so getting to know people in the industry. It's kind of a mix. It's students and people who are looking to hire students. So you might want to check it out, especially if you're looking for a co-op. And there's also some really good talks that happen at this event. So last night there was a talk about Svelte.js, which is a pretty cool thing. It's pretty nifty. It's very new, but I would recommend taking a look at this. I will add a link to Blackboard. So Jesse Skinner did a great talk on that at North OT last night. He's a really, really smart guy. He also has a Twitch channel where he does live coding, so I will add a link to that as well because you can learn a lot from that guy. Super smart. So definitely check out Svelte. It's super cool. Like I said, it's new, but it's pretty powerful. It's very simple. It's pretty cool. And check out North OT if you can as well. So I'll add links to all of those on Blackboard. Okay, so that is all the cool stuff. Let's move on. So just before we do the new stuff, what did we talk about last week? Who can remind me? What did we talk about? Seems so long ago. Yeah.
Oh, we talked about, I remember, carousels was a very big topic.
Yes. Yep. So we talked about sort of when to use carousels, when to maybe not. The fact that you need to be mindful about accessibility when you're using carousels. And then we looked at how Bootstrap can make it really easy to incorporate a carousel in our site. So that was last week. This week it's all about navigation. So we're going to start just by talking about the importance of navigation, sort of from a usability perspective. And then, of course, we're going to see how Bootstrap can help us create easy navigation for our website or application. So a little bit about navigation. When it comes to usability, navigation, obviously, it's super important. Your user needs to easily be able to navigate throughout your site to find what they're looking for. Otherwise, they're not going to be too happy with your site. So it doesn't matter how creative or aesthetically pleasing your site is. If your user has a hard time navigating through your site or application, there's more to that thought. It's bad. Bad news. That's the end there. So navigation, what is it? Generally defined as the set of actions and techniques guiding users throughout the app or website, enabling them to fulfill their goals and successfully interact with the product. Another quote for you: the aspect of efficient navigation has a great impact on setting positive user experience. Users start using apps or websites with particular aims and expectations, and that's the designer's task, to set the best and easiest route to solve the user's problems. So your navigation needs to be clear. It needs to be well defined. It needs to be easily found. It's very important for the success of your site and the user experience of your site as well, which is directly related, right? So a few navigation elements. We have the menu. We have call to action, or CTA. We have a bar, a button, a switch, a picker, or a checkbox. These can all be used to navigate throughout the site. So I feel like I had some examples for you. Let's take a look at this. I believe that is... So this is a great article talking all about navigation. Gives you some nice UI, UX definitions. And then it shows you an example of each. So when we're talking about bars, that's what we're talking about. We have buttons. So something like a go back button is essentially navigation. What else do we have? The plus button. So all these pieces can be used to navigate or find your way throughout a website or an application. So I've mentioned a few things, but what do we need to consider when creating navigation items? Let's brainstorm that for a bit, actually, instead of just throwing it out there. Take a moment just to talk with people at your table. What do you think we need to consider when we are creating navigation items? Okay, so think about the code, think about your user, what are they expecting? What do we need to think about? There's a few different things that we need to consider.
Exactly. On the back end side, it's definitely your divisions just to make it easier to keep track of where everything is on the site.
So I'll hand in that second one this weekend.
Oh, assignment 1?
Whatever's the next. I've already done that.
Okay.
It's the next one. What do you think?
Oh, lab 2.
Yeah.
That we're working on today. Yes, for sure.
Oh, not today. You're handing that in today, or assigning it today?
Assigning it today, and it's due. Lab 2, assignment 1 is due October 11th.
Lab
Or
1, I guess. Well, I guess it was lab 1 that I already handed in. I will
Okay.
so I'll hand in the next one, which you did on sliders and carousels.
Oh, so we did an in-class exercise. It wasn't actually a lab.
Oh, wasn't?
Yeah.
But it is on the description is as a lab on the.
Was it? Now I'm confusing myself. Hold on. You're probably right. Let me check. Oh,
whatever it is we're talking about, that's how you get that. So good enough.
So we're trying to, yeah, that's trying to get less for that.
Most people just like but if you're going to someplace else, you gotta make it obviously that's where your navigation.
That's what you're doing today. So it's gonna show something. I guess you did.
Yeah.
Which I could Oh, okay. That's fine. It's not.
I just saw that.
Yeah, well, and I won't be able to watch it right now.
Okay, so I'm hearing some great ideas. Let's go back to this question and you can share your thoughts. So it's pretty open, but what do we need to consider when creating navigation items for our UI? What, as web developers, do we need to think about? I heard lots of good ideas. I hope someone will share. Anybody? So I heard someone say consistency, kind of over here-ish. That's a good point. So you want to be consistent with your navigation items. Because you would throw people off if they look one way on one page and they look different on another page. That's just going to be disconcerting for your user. So definitely consistency. What else? What about for people that are using a screen reader? What do we need to think of? We know that everyone knows what a screen reader is, right? It just reads the website to you. So they don't have those visual cues that prompt them to let them know that it is navigation. And so we need to think about that. We need to make sure our site is accessible for everyone. So we can do things like add ARIA roles to further describe those elements, and that will help screen reader users understand the navigation more. So accessibility, consistency, what else? Any other ideas? I heard so many good ones. No one wants to share? What about response? Is that a hand up? Are you sure?
I mean,
a tentative one. No, I'm joking. So responsiveness. I feel like you guys mentioned responsiveness. Excuse me. So what were your thoughts about that? I'm kind of forcing you to share.
Well, if it's responsive, it needs to also take into consideration that when it collapses into a small device, the nav needs to be minimum 40 by 40 pixels for touchscreen. I guess it's standard.
Yeah. Yeah. So Google has, I think I showed this in the other class, mobile-friendly test. And when you run it through that, I'm pretty sure I showed you guys, but I will show you again. When you run your site through that, it does test for a certain clickability of your navigation items or buttons. So yeah, if you don't have them big enough, your site's not going to be considered to be mobile friendly. So good point. All right, cool. So a few other things to consider when we're talking about navigation. We want to plan and choose the menu order strategically. You want to use a familiar structure and user-friendly language. So even the names that you give to your navigation items is important. You need to be thoughtful about that. Adopt the motto, less is more. You might have seen navigation where there's tons of items in the top level navigation. That's weird. Don't do that. Less is definitely more. So if you have a lot of items, you can always sort of move things to a drop-down if that makes sense. You want to be specific. Linking back to the homepage with your logo, that's sort of expected for users, so make sure you hook that up. And make your primary navigation stand out. That is the main way that your user is going to navigate throughout your website, so you want to make sure that's pretty clear and easily accessible. Oh, look, I have more. Okay, so you want to keep header options to a minimum. You want to add a search bar, if that makes sense. Adding a fat footer. Who knows what a fat footer is? Any ideas? Yeah.
It's literally a large
Like
footer.
a large footer, yes. Again, this link is really good. It explains more about what a fat footer is, but it's basically just a really big footer, and it would have those same navigation links that you have at the top would be reflected at the bottom as well. So it's just another way for your user to navigate. Add recommended content to recirculate traffic. Forget what I mean by that. Anyway, single page scrolling navigation. So those long scroll pages, that can be a good idea. So now we know more. We've talked a little bit about what we need to think about when working with navigation and creating navigation. Let's see how Bootstrap can help us out. So we're gonna create quite a few different forms of navigation. So let's start by opening a new HTML file. I would go ahead and save this in a week 4 folder. We're also going to need a CSS file. We're going to do some custom CSS. And in your index file, we're just going to grab from getbootstrap.com just that sort of starter template for Bootstrap. I always spell Bootstrap wrong. I don't know where that's going. So if you get to the Bootstrap site, click Get Started, and then scroll down. There is the starter template. So copy that and paste in your HTML. So you can just save that as your index file in your week 4 folder. And we're also going to create a separate CSS file. You can save that. Usually save my CSS as main. Another common one is styles.css. Maybe I'll do styles today. All right, so just a few styles in our main or styles.css file. We're just going to, I'll show you what we're going to end up with once we've added all of our different types of navigation that Bootstrap lets us do. So we're going to have all this cool stuff going on, Bootstrap, navs, and tabs. Let's set up just some custom CSS styles so that we can sort of space between these different examples and then just add a box or border around them. So we're going to go ahead to our, and this is just basic CSS, to our section element. We're going to add margin 50 pixels. So that would be to the top and the bottom, and 0 to left and right. We're going to also add some padding. So the nice thing about Bootstrap is it does that box sizing border box, so we don't have to worry about padding being added to our element. So that's cool. We don't have to worry about that. It takes that off our plate. And then we're going to add a border of 2 pixels, solid, and you can make it whatever you like, whatever color. And then, if you notice, every other example has a gray background. So to do that, we're going to use this cool pseudo selector, nth child odd, and we'll just set the background color. I'm just going to do a light gray color. You can do, again, whatever color you're feeling. And that's it for our custom CSS, just making sure we have some space between these examples, and then just for fun, we're doing a different background color for every other example. So I have this file saved, and I need to link it in my HTML. Any thoughts about where I would want to add this file? Where would I want this CSS to load? Particularly if I was adding a lot of custom styles to my site. Any ideas? Would I want it to go before Bootstrap? So knowing what you know about CSS, I'm seeing a shake of the head. Yes, why? I'm going to force you to answer again. You're right. We wouldn't want it to go here.
Order of precedence, or like whatever's declared last will overwrite whatever was declared first.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the thing with CSS. The last thing that's specified sort of takes precedence, right? So even in the order of how your CSS files load. So this only become, for right now, for this example, it doesn't matter too much. But when you start to work with Bootstrap sites, sometimes you're almost fighting the Bootstrap default styles with your own custom styles. So you want to make sure that your CSS file loads after Bootstrap. So let's go ahead and link that up. Oops, style sheet, there we go. Cool. All right, so that's the easy stuff. We are now going to get into the body of our HTML and start to work with some of these examples. So let's change this title. Question, yeah?
Can you just go back to the CSS?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's just from Bootstrap. Yeah, just that starter template.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you are done the CSS, you can always take a look at, sorry, I don't mean to cover the code. You can always look at the Bootstrap site and check out the documentation about navs and tabs, get a head start on that. Or you could add more to your CSS file if you want to make it look fancy. All right, is everyone good with the CSS? Good to move on? All right. Cool, so we're now back in the index file. Let's go ahead, so just taking a quick look at what we've got here. We just copied that starter template from the Bootstrap site. So if you didn't quite get that step, if you go to getbootstrap.com, click on documentation, and then scroll down, they give you this nice starter template to work with. So you can copy that and paste that in your HTML file. So taking a quick look at what's going on here, we have the Bootstrap CDN for the CSS already set up for us. We now have our link to our custom CSS file, so kind of makes sense to put a comment there. Custom CSS. We've got that viewport set, and that's for, again, Bootstrap's mobile first, so that makes sure that things look good on a smaller viewport, particularly a mobile device. Let's change this title. Instead of Hello World, let's go Module 4, Navs and Tabs. And we can do the same thing for the primary heading as well. And then after that, we just have our JavaScript loaded right before the closing body tag. And we're going to be working within the body, so adding a few different examples of Bootstrap navs and tabs. So before we do that, let's start off with adding that div to wrap all of our content, and we'll give that the class of container. So when I use the class container, am I setting a fixed width or a fluid width? It is fixed, yeah. So it sets, it's a max width of about 1170, I'm pretty sure. So it's never going to be bigger than that. But there is the option, if you want, to do container fluid, and that is a fluid width. So it's always 100% of whatever your viewport is. So we'll stick with a fixed width for now. That works well for our example. And then, so indent that. That's inside of our div. I'm going to start by doing a simple, simple navigation. Wow, can't spell today. Navigation using Bootstrap. So we're going to create a section to kind of contain this example. Within that section, we'll put a secondary heading of the basics. And then we're going to build our navigation. So if you look at, and I'll show you this, if you look at the documentation for, if you go under documentation components and then you check out navs, it talks about, so if you see their example, what do you notice about this example? So think about it from a semantic point of view. What's up with this example? Or what's kind of curious about this example? So semantics is important. It's important to use tags that really describe the content. So particularly look at the class, look at what elements they've used and what might be missing. Any ideas? Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of weird that they haven't used nav, which is nice and semantic. It really describes that it's navigation, right? But they've used the nav class. So it does sort of talk to that. So classes are used throughout, so your markup can be super flexible. You can use an unordered list like above, or an ordered list if that works. Or roll your own with a nav element, because the .nav uses display flex. The nav links behave the same as nav items would, but without the extra markup. So they're kind of saying they're trying to avoid extra markup. But I would argue that adding that nav element is pretty important from a semantic point of view. So let's go ahead and add that. But then our navigation items, they are a list. So it also makes sense to put everything in an unordered list. And we'll give that the class of nav. So within our unordered list, you can just go ahead and add 1, 2, 3, 4. Doesn't really matter how many. Let's add 4 though. We're going to add 4 navigation items. So those items are going to be wrapped in LIs, and they're also going to be anchor links. They're going to be links. So the structure is going to look like this. And then we're going to go back and add some classes so that it's all bootstrapped up. Okay, so you can just start with that, and then we'll go back and add what we need to. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're just adding the hashtag or number sign for now just to fill that link. We can go back and add links after, but we'll just kind of make it a dummy link for now. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment. Just make sure you've got that. If you want to add some comments, go ahead. Feel free to add about this nav tag, how we added that for semantics. I didn't do this, but this is always a good idea to add end container when we're working with divs. Particularly when there's lots of divs, it can get confusing. So adding little comments like that can help. So if you open this up in your browser, and I don't know, there we are. Not going to look like much, especially because I haven't even added any text for those links. But once we add text, still not going to look like very much because we haven't added the Bootstrap classes yet. So before we do that, make sure you go and add some text. So link, another link. This is going to be, we're going to set this up as a disabled link. And there we go. So not looking great yet, but we're going to go back, add some Bootstrap classes, and magic, it's going to look a lot better. So to all your LIs, just go ahead and add the class of nav item. And then to your links that is embedded in the LI, you're going to add nav link. And to the first one, so sorry, it's nav-link, and the first one also add the class of active. So I'll give you a few moments to do that. Just adding that class. That class needs to be added to every LI and every link as well, but not active, just nav link for, whoops, and I forgot the word class there. There we go. Okay, so every LI should have a class of nav item, and that's so every nav item should have that class, and then every link should have the class of nav link. So the first one is active. Also to the last one, just add a class of disabled, and that's going to add or apply specific styles to that last link. So once you have all that, go ahead and check that out in your browser. And still doesn't look like much, but without us doing really anything other than adding classes, it looks a lot more like a navigation. So one more thing I want to add here to this disabled link, if you look at it in your browser, you can see just by adding that class of disabled, it's applied certain styles. So if you had a link, I'm trying to think of an example why you would have a disabled link on a site, but I'm sure there is one, I just can't think of one. But you'll notice that all the other links are clickable. When you hover on them, there's a hover effect, I think. Yeah, a hover effect applied. This disabled link becomes not clickable and you can't click on it just by adding that class. Oh, that could be. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's probably it. The one example, right? Yeah. Cool. So the only other thing, again, we're always sort of mindful of accessibility. So we would want to, and we would want to go back and add more ARIA roles, but for sure we would want to add ARIA disabled, and so that would let the user that is using a screen reader know that that link is disabled, because that visual clue of not being able to click on it and it also having a different color isn't available to them. So we would want to make sure for accessibility to add this ARIA role. And if you did want to learn more about ARIA roles, I believe I added, let me check before I say that I did. Yes, I think I did. Yeah. So if you want to know more about ARIA roles and accessibility, under weekly learning and helpful resources, there is a link there that talks quite in depth about ARIA and how you can make your site more accessible by adding these roles. And they're pretty easy too, right? So they're just attributes that you can add. Okay, cool. So again, if we look at our navigation now, it looks a lot better. It looks more like a navigation. Still not too much going on as far as styles. Some of these we would have to add our own custom styles to make it look how we want it. But we can do different things with Flexbox. Because Flexbox is actually part of Bootstrap 4. So we have access to those functionalities. So something like, if we do, what is it? Yes, okay, so if we had the class justify content center, without doing very much work, we now easily have our navigation items centered in the middle of the page. And again, that's thanks to Flexbox. And then we can also, if we don't want that, we can say justify content end. And then we have it aligned to the right. So that is pretty cool. We can also stack it. So we can use flex column. So we'll get rid of that justify content for now. What we could do, so we could have our menu centered and horizontal on a larger viewport, because that makes sense. And then on a smaller viewport, we could change it to be stacked on top of each other. So what is the class here? Oh, right. Okay. So we're going to add a class of flex column. There it is. And so again, very easily, we have our items stacked. So that's going to be my challenge to you. What I would like you to do is, on a larger viewport, I want your menu to just be horizontal. And then on a smaller viewport, use the flex column class to have the items stacked one on top of each other. Okay, so remember you can use those different viewport sizes, so the class of small, medium, extra large, extra small, and then always remember it applies to that size and up. So try and think of it from a mobile first perspective. So I'll give you about 10 minutes to do that. You can work with the people at your table. So change up that menu, stacked on a smaller viewport and horizontal on a larger viewport. So on desktop, your menu should look like this, or actually the centered one, so just change that to center. So on a larger viewport, your menu is like that. And then when you shrink your screen down or you're looking at it on a mobile device, it should look like this. Okay, so take a look at what we did when we were working with the grid. So that was a couple of weeks ago. That'll help you out. Yes, question? Yeah. Not in very yeah. No, you don't need to query. You need to use the classes that Bootstrap has. So if you look at the documentation or try to ask the people at your table, then you can get ideas. Okay.
Like the layout CSS.
Oh, because yours has the gray box on.
Right. That's
So you need some classes there. Go back. So that just by content middle is also a class. You figure things after that. And that should fix it. Yeah. So you need to have two classes to do that. Okay, let's keep looking at. So let's open your book.
Small column.
Oh, just by content center, not middle. I always do the same thing. I take middle. It's the word is actually middle to center, and that'll.
Did you want it centered or do you think?
Doesn't matter either way, centered or just by content and. So okay, way better. What it is, if you just space after your yeah.
You don't tell me. You can tell me.
So you should have like space around each one of those things, and you should get that. Okay.
Oh, insanely irritating. You're really not on it.
Okay. Yeah.
How'd you get your center? What's your class?
Just my content center.
And this is you're really equals both together.
So it's default.
This
Screen size is supposed to run image just like this is different, but I always get the same thing. There we go. Did you? It does, but it's not really justify content. I see justify content. Oh, medium sound. I put medium justify content. Justify content sound. How did you think that?
Justify.
Oh. Documentation.
I was looking at too, and I pulled this. I was looking at the argumentation for some scraps
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
So I think I made that challenge a little harder than it needed to be. So you don't actually have to center it, but do make it horizontal on a larger viewport and then stacked on a smaller. So it's gonna maybe make it easier. But if you figured it out, sweet. That's good. Oh, wait. There we go.
It stays centered for the entire context.
Oh,
Here, they get and then it just breaks. It's just wide. It's way wide.
yeah, that's what yeah.
Actually, like jiggles my kidneys.
Okay.
Well, like, so the same thing like
sure we have to add, yeah, that should work.
I'm gonna miss this.
So,
I'm gonna miss this.
also might be, what?
You're like, you're your character.
What? Oh, always.
Yeah, only more less likely you got to go this next. Because you're like more like
Yeah.
Whatever class. So you have to think of mobile first. So always put so if you want to do that, you flex left and then whatever you want to make after that, bigger than that, so that class is
Well,
yeah, exactly.
So technically, this would
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm noticing that I actually put my answer up there. If you took a look at that,
But there might be a different way to do this. There probably is. So what I did is, and remember we always want to think mobile first when we're working with Bootstrap. So here on a smaller viewport, I want it to be flex column. So that would be the stacked display. And then flex medium row is when it goes back to a horizontal display. So this would mean on anything smaller than medium, it would be displayed as column. And then medium and larger, it would go back to row. So let's check it out. So here is my medium or larger. If I make it smaller, I now have the column stacked display happening. Did anyone else find a different way to do it? Yeah.
yeah, I did it really fashion.
Oh.
I used column small or call small and then one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so you're thinking more the grid. Yeah,
Yeah, you can
that
use
works
it.
too. Yeah,
I like this one.
cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's always multiple ways to do things, right? So this works. It can be tricky sometimes because you always have to think, okay, think about my smallest viewport first. What do I want to happen there? And then apply the styles for anything larger than that because that will apply to the medium viewport size and everything after that, so large and extra large. Cool. Okay, so I think that's a good spot to take a break. So we'll come back at 2:15 and we'll continue on with our navs and tabs exploration.